Welcome to the new episode of the podcast A Journey into Fraud Prevention, where I try to figure out with my guest how did they end up in fraud prevention and what keeps them there. I'm your host Ivan, and in this episode I'm joined by Dmitrii Emelianov, who is Fraud Prevention Manager at Yandex. Dmitrii is working with ad fraud and he will share with us some aspect of it. For more, please relax and listen. Поехали! Dmitrii, thank you for joining us today. I know you're one of the listeners of our podcast and you already know the first question. But to the listeners who join us today, fraud prevention. What is fraud prevention for you?
Hi, Ivan. Thanks for having me. I think when people first hear about fraud prevention, what comes to people's mind is, for example, banks' card monitoring system or manual content moderation processes. But this is only a tip of the iceberg. So to clarify, let's break down into several examples into what goals of fraud prevention could be. The first goal, in my opinion, is to making customer journey safe and seamless. The well-known fraud examples here could be third-party fraud with card not present operations, internet bank account takeover, or employee direct stealing from the customer account. In my sphere, in internet ads, it could be the case that somebody is trying to click all the budget of some advertiser's campaign to make his competitors spend money just in vain. The second goal of fraud prevention could be protecting business by itself. Here, fraud cases or fraud scenarios could not be connected with end users or end customers. For example, when employee manipulates with card limits, or the crypto or forex exchange are being abused for making multinational transfer. It is not a direct purpose, and business is under risk of some sanctions, especially in different jurisdictions where such kinds of businesses are working. I want to emphasize that there are some kind of businesses for which fraud prevention must be in its core. For example, retail lending or online advertising, or I can't imagine search engines working with no fraud prevention at all, because in that case, search result would be absolutely irrelevant. So to wrap up, I would say that fraud prevention is a set of measures aimed to make business operation working smoothly, to make business able to increase quality or to deliver new products to the market. And what is the most important thing, I guess, is to keep losses in preset boundaries, to make them predictable to the board or to the stakeholders.
Thank you for describing it in a section perspective. However, when it does make sense for someone who working in fraud prevention. It definitely makes sense. Each of the board, I believe everyone gonna sign in under it. However, if you try to describe to someone who is not in this area, or for example, so I know you're working in the Google version of search company in Russia. It's called Yandex, and let's say someone decide to choose a company like that. Company provides opportunity to use fraud prevention there. And for someone, it's a matter of cost to say, I don't want to use external protection because it's going to cost me a lot. I don't believe my business going to be abused by fraudsters. Do you believe that fraud prevention aspect is kind of underestimating by someone, or it just like hide it from most of the world, and the people just start to care about fraud prevention when they facing with the problem?
All right, I will answer it first from the helicopter view. I believe that every business must have some measures or controls that its operation are being done as it was intended in the start. It could be done with either fraud prevention processes or with classic cybersecurity. For example, when we don't allow AAs, database administrators, to correct something, and we protect our customers without them even being aware of it. I think you would be regret if once you opened your internet bank, you would see zero balance there, right? So it's not only about fraud prevention, it's about business by itself. Do we need to use external tools to prevent fraud, to prevent some process from fraud. It also depends from the business. Let's consider in my example where I'm working now. In Yandex, in advertising, I think around 20% of traffic is being blocked because of the fraud filters. What does it mean for the end user? It means that with no fraud prevention protection, the majority of users will be spend their money for nothing. So I think this is example of the core of the businesses where fraud prevention must be in its core. Speaking about other examples, we all know about banks. I think that bank could buy some external tool, and there are pros and cons like everywhere. It depends on what is comes with it in a package, whether it will have some analytical support or not, whether it will decrease the latency of some transaction, etc., etc., etc. Did I answer to your question, Ivan?
Yeah, you are. I mean, at least for me, and I believe everyone who listens to this podcast definitely follows the thread that you describe here. And how long have you been in fraud prevention industry?
I do fraud prevention for almost 9 years now. I've been working in different sides of fraud prevention. I started in consulting. Later, I was working in a vendor because my company had its own solution. And currently, I worked, as we used to say, in-house. So I protect the business by itself with its end customers.
Is it differences between working with consulting and in a company who provides solutions?
What do you mean the company who
Um,
provides solutions? That we provide the end
yeah,
product for our
that's
customers?
right.
And and our customers are not connected to fraud prevention by themselves, right?
But in general, in your
Uh,
experience, you work in a different companies. Do you see? Is it actually you need to know different aspects, or you learn something in a company and you can apply it without additional knowledge, without additional I don't know expertise? The same as when you start to ride a bike, you just like you learn it once and you can ride the bike during your life. Is it the same?
I get the question. The principles are the same. It is all about stop somebody lost the money or other assets, but the subtleties are different. I would say that consulting is more about sales, is more about providing pilots and pushing the idea where fraud prevention must be developed, which processes or IT systems must be protected in the next stage. Working in-house is about the diving into the deep. So we cover process by process, detail by detail, and do it consequently. Let's break down into several examples. When I was working in consulting, the hardest thing was to find something interesting in others' company infrastructure. How usual companies ask some consulting company to help them. They could not be even aware of some fraud having place in their infrastructure and in their processes. Some of them might be following some fancy trends that my competitor used to call that consultant, and I will call too. And usually we started with getting into the customer's infrastructure with no contract signed, providing a pilot project, finding some interesting cases in their data, some real losses. And after that, we would develop our strategy of development for that particular customer. Working in-house, it's a little bit different because when we are protecting our own product or group of products, we have a lot of stakeholders. We have a lot of cross-functional teams who are aware what's the problem right now. And with fraud prevention processes or filters, we could protect not only protect customers not only from fraudsters, but also we could increase our product. For example, how internet ads working. When you see a banner, it calls some API and says, it is show. I was showed. Then somebody clicked on the banner. Another API is called and says, I was clicked. And for example, duplicated clicks or duplicated shows could be also filtered in fraud prevention platform. not only some some filters which are against abuse at particular advertising campaign.
I have follow-up questions about like advertising in general, because generally speaking, I don't have much knowledge about it. I have like hypothetically understanding how that work. And this for me was a shock like a long time ago when someone told me that we have a fraud prevention for advertising, and I just my first impression was, is it like fraud there? What's the point to do any controls in place? And as you described, someone can click multiple times on a banner that's fused with two different ways. First one, it's a wrong expectation from the company, so all metrics screw up. That's the expectation that a specific banner gonna be a huge deal, and they're gonna start to populate it in more different sites, more different areas. And the second, that every time when someone click it, you're supposed to pay for this click, even if it's like small amount of money. However, one click might cost, I know, 1 cent, but 10 clicks it's already like 10 cents. So and not best to say to we face it's best to say, is it well known business nowadays, that's someone just created a bot, just click it one banner like, I know, millions time to show increase of the business in that kind of business. Maybe then gonna sell themselves because they say, you can see how we populate it, how we just like fake clicks. And in a way, how you're working with fraud prevention. The question is, this is very unique area of knowledge. Do you think it's supposed to be more public way, or remain more close way for someone who working with advertising in general? What do you think about it?
Well, I think that this domain of knowledge, advertising fraud in particular, and online ads, it is quite close domain of knowledge. It is not widespread as end user and maybe customer or just user of it. You don't have to know what is inside under the hood. You can just use it to be satisfied with it or not. And in case if you're not satisfied with it, advertising platforms need to either increase their quality or to protect from fraud better, right? And about the goals of fraudsters in ads. In general, there are two kinds of frauds. The first one is, as I said before, somebody's trying to click competitor's budget. Here, the end customer suffers, and it could be connected with either low traffic quality. For example, when there are a lot of ads in some application which is used by kids who are playing games there and they are doing misclicks. This is one case. Or somebody created a lot of bots to click all the budget of somebody's competitors, and he's trying to do search requests in order to click on his competitor's banner. The second example is how it works. The online platforms buy traffic from suppliers. It could be some networks or chains or some aggregators, or it could be some sites or applications. The site could be good by itself, but another could be absolutely irrelevant with no decent content in it, and all visits on that site might be created by bots. And our goal to distinguish those sites and applications who has no decent amount of organic traffic and to ban it, because here we not only decrease the quality of our service, we also have direct losses as a buyer of that traffic.
Thank you for this detailed description how this kind of fraud works. One day when I have super popular and I need to work with my competitors, I definitely know how to reduce reduce their traffic platform. In general, fraud prevention, it's not something popular, and specifically, I don't know what about you, but sometimes when people ask me where I'm working, and I say fraud prevention, everyone just, yeah, okay, okay, something with fraud. That's right. But how you decide to go that way? Is it a specific degree, or you might one day wake up and read some newspapers, say, "Yeah, I'm this guy who going to against the bad guys and prevent everything." What is your story behind it?
Well, I think it's quite usual because my university thesis topic was the usage of neural networks in issuer banks' fraud prevention system. So I started my way in fraud prevention sitting in the dorms room, coding my first fraud project. And at that time, I realized that job might be interesting, and I decided to keep developing in this career path. For other people who are just thinking about being involved in fraud prevention, I would say that first of all, it's about the special way of thinking, a special way of taking decisions, and it's also demanding to attention to details. I think these qualities must be put on the first place and not some special education. On this second place, I would put ability of using some tools like SQL, Python, or machine learning because it's very useful, and I can imagine my not a single day without using of these tools. As about special degree and some specialization, I believe that it is applicable only for special, very unusual or domains which we as a inhabitant don't see in our everyday life. What comes to my mind is corporate finances or accounting in general. The institutions is about knowledge of domain by itself, not about fraud in particular.
Specifically about last sentence that you mentioned. I saw that one before in my career. That's specifically from marketing perspective. People who working, for example, as a business analyst in the marketing, they saw a lot of the not the right things in their reporting. They start to investigate and then found some kind of pattern, and at the end, they decide to move to the fraud prevention part. But I saw a different examples when the people work with fraud prevention couldn't find anything and decide to go in another path. So do you believe that the fraud prevention is the same way as a different career path? It's 30% of the luck that you find something interesting and 70% of the knowledge in the specific domain? Or it's majority, like I don't know, 99% of cases, you'll be good in the fraud prevention if you know a specific domain?
I would say that the essential thing for fraud prevention is to clearly understand the path of your customer or of any different entity who is involved in that process, to understand the checkpoints of it and what kind of data it might produce, which you can analyze and use in your investigation. And the second ingredient of being successful in fraud prevention, I think, is understanding that there are no silly questions. If you see, for example, a direct credit transfer, you might ask yourself, what will happen if I will put some account number in the details field? Will it influence my transfer or not? And the answer on that question might differs from payment system to payment system. So I would say the hunger of details makes you successful in fraud prevention and not other knowledges. If you don't have knowledge, you can have it in a short time.
I like it. This is in line with what I thought about in general, and all the knowledge and all the skills you can build during the time. However, just if you're not the person who look on specific like kind of discovering part, that's maybe harder to work in fraud prevention. However, it's multiple positions. For example, manual review, which is part of fraud prevention, is not require a lot of investigation parts. It's required to check several conditions. If they match, just click approve. If they're not, click decline. And plenty of people around the world happy with that section. However, you mentioned about the institution in general. I usually ask people, do we need fraud institution? But I want to ask a different kind of questions. Do you believe it's going to be worse or the bad sign if we will have this kind of institution for fraud? Like, I know, for example, if tomorrow it's going to be requirements worldwide to have specific certificate to work with fraud prevention.
Yes, I got the question. Thank you. But first of all, come back to your statement about people who work in manual reviews, that there is no requirement for having a specific knowledges or skills. It depends. Even if you'll consider our familiar banks processes, how would this average person explore the transaction which is made, for example, by VIP user? I don't think it will obey the ordinary scripts or rules or checklists these reviewers do have. So I wanted to say that even in a manual review team, you have a lot of possibilities to explore, to show yourself, and to evolve. Yes, it is a little bit harder than in the third line, for example, when you're working on improving the quality of your filtration. You can move from team to team, and it is your chance. Answering to the question about fraud institution and some mandatory certifications, I think that one can learn principles, recipes, and taking into account that fraudsters and fraud fighters are influence each other and living in perpetual loop, feedback loop. I think that those knowledge would be getting older with a high speed. So I saw several examples when the government was trying to create fraud institutions or the services or systems where banks could exchange the information about committed fraud in order to protect other banks from such fraudsters users with their passport data, etc., etc. But in the majority of cases which I saw, the new banks who received that recommendation, for example, to put that user on their blacklist, already knew about it because that speed was not enough. I think in general, having that regulation or institution which will organize all players in some domain is lucrative. But it must be answer to the real fraud evolving tempo. So it must be speeded up.
Thank you regarding your opinion about manual review. I'm agree with you. What I meant when I described it that's manual review team, I didn't mean that it is low skill team. I know a lot of the people who work in the manual review team and they are very skilled and they looking for opportunity, they hunger to more and more knowledge and grow in the fraud career path. But in huge corporations, most of the time manual review team responds for just clicking two buttons, approve or decline, if the transaction met or did met certain conditions. Regarding the education, you mentioned really great point that this degree that might be exist in the fraud area is very useful, but it might go on like in next day when it's published because it's very dynamic area. And Dmitry, have you ever been victim of fraud?
Yes, I will tell a hilarious story about it. When I was living in Istanbul, I was having a stroll and I saw a guy who dropped a shoe brush. I said to him, "Hey, you dropped a shoe brush," because I thought that this brush was the only tool how he can earn money. And I was right. But this tool was the way how he managed to earn money from me. So I left him with no 200 liras in my pocket and several stains on my sneakers. It is the only case of committed fraud towards me, which I could remember, but I do have a lot of phone calls with social engineering attempts to get my passwords, one-time passwords, or answers to the questions which will help to restore my account somewhere. And I have a lot of phishing mails, but I managed to get through it. So I'm not a victim of fraud.
But I believe you have plenty of services when someone call you say, I'm head of security department from and especially in cases when you have Visa card and they say we're from MasterCard and we need to block your Visa card, and some people, oh my god, I need to do it, where is my Visa card? That's a crazy word.
Actually, you reminded me about the stories when fraud prevention was not well developed, and when real chief information security officers was calling to ask whether that person has done that operation or not.
You thought it is fake, but it was real, yeah?
Yes, I wanted to emphasize that back to the days, it was really possible that the head of security department will call you by themselves.
I have one question left. We briefly discussed it before, and I would love to hear maybe some more information from you if you have that one. So, first of all, would you recommend fraud prevention as career path for someone who is looking to change their career or change what they're doing right now or looking for a first job? And the second one, you already share a lot of your opinions, but maybe you give us a bit some more advices for people who just sitting right now and struggling to join fraud prevention.
Definitely, I could recommend to join the fraud prevention path because I remember myself doing my first project, and I caught myself in that flow condition for the first time. And if you feel that you're in that flow condition, also thinking about fraud prevention, about different schemes and ways how you can steal money or somebody could steal money or different asset, you truly could consider getting into. A bit of advice, as I said before, there are no stupid conjectures. Ask, seek, suggest. This is way how fraudsters do, and this is what fraud prevention fighters, fraud prevention specialists do to prevent, not just to react. I think that's it.
You know, you just like remind me these words that I'm here every time when I'm just using public transport here in the United Kingdom. They say, see it, say it, sort it. So you kind of repeat on a way which is related to fraud prevention. It is time to end our episode. Thank you once again, Dmitry. It was a pleasure to have a chat with you. I learned a lot of the stuff, and for everyone who working with advertising fraud, I'm definitely recommend this podcast and all the advices that you can hear from Dmitry, who has significant experience in fraud prevention, specifically in that area. It is very valuable information and useful that you can easily to apply to your day-to-day work. If you like this episode, I encourage you to please share it with your friends. Don't forget to rating and subscribe as well. It really means a lot for me, for someone who is spending time to work on this podcast and try to share more knowledge about fraud prevention and someone who participate here as well.
My pleasure, Evan.
Let me end our episode with my favorite word, cut.